Hello and welcome to Man's Model Moments Midweek Model Meet. I almost got that wrong. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. The number keeps coming up, so I expect some of the usual regulars will pop in as we go on. We've got G&A Scale Model Apprentice, David Barber, welcome, Stuart, Brian. I've got Phil, Steve T, hello again. I thought you might have enough with last night. Idwell Williams, many more, obviously not in chat. We've got Graham McRobert. Graham, it looked like Micro Robot for a second from my bizarre eyes. George Davis, Douglas Anderson, some names I've not seen before, which is always good to see. John Christmas, welcome. And Graham's Modelling Mayhem, Gary, Richard Howie, hello. Hello and welcome, everybody. We've got a subject I've been wanting to talk about for a while now tonight, which is the subject of women in scale modelling, both historically, kind of their depiction in modelling, and also how things have been changing, I think, over the past maybe 10 or 15 years or so. We'll get some other opinions on that. And what, if anything, the industry can do to actually encourage that trend, because up until very recently, we were an almost exclusively male hobby. Over 98%. My channel demographics, are similar. So I think that's changing, as I said, gradually, and I'll discuss some of the reasons for that. But I'm only one half of that XY chromosome mix. And we do have an actual, real, live lady person who I will introduce now. It's Jen. Hello.
Hello.
So Jen is from, well, do you want to introduce your channel, Genesis Designs?
Yeah, for those that don't know me, if they don't, it's Genesis Designs and Modelcraft, obviously based on my name. It's a witty pun based on my name.
So Jen's got a great channel. I'll link it, as always, with the guests in the description after the live has aired. If I forget, remind me, people. I don't usually, but sometimes. It's a great channel, some nice models on there. Please do go and check it out and subscribe. And why don't you give us a quick modeler bio, Jen?
Oh God, a modelling bio. Well, that's a tricky one. I've been modelling since I was roughly several years old. Like a lot of us, I suppose. I started modelling when I was a child. I can't clearly remember why, because it was a long time ago. I'm a lot older than I look. And essentially did the same thing that probably most guys do, which is I modelled until maybe late teens, early 20s, then decided to do living and life and all those things. And I came back to the hobby actually sort of semi-bizarrely, but almost fittingly. I joined the Air Force in 2002. And I had to do a stint on gate guard, which is always fun, whilst I was in my trade training phase at RAF Cosford. So I'm there sort of sitting around for the week off. You do 7 days of 12-hour shifts and then you have 7 days off, at least you used to. Not so much now. And I was bored. I didn't have anything to do. So I went across to the museum, which obviously is pretty much right up next door. And they used to have a really good gift shop. Again, not so much now. And I bought a model. I bought an Academy Spitfire 14 and I dug out the dusty biscuit tin, had all my hum rolls in it, and, found a few bits and pieces of tools, and I sat at the table and I made it. And I have not stopped modelling since then, which, yeah, that's 22 years now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I've just carried on onwards and upwards, as it were.
So you say 22 years, but you said 2002, and it's oh yeah, 22 years. Wow.
Yeah. No, honestly, yeah, it doesn't sound that long ago, does it? Yes.
No, 2002 sounds like a few years ago, just before COVID.
Yeah, it's a minute.
So I don't know if you've noticed this, Jen, but I mean, I started modelling like you when I was a kid, as far back as I can remember, and it was my dad. So like a lot of people, it was a relative, often the dad or an uncle or something that was doing it, and you want to do what they're doing, get into it, make a terrible mess of things, have a break, come back to it, maybe have another break, come back to it. But back when I sort of, I guess, for the second time got into it in the 90s, it was very rare to see anybody other than a long-suffering partner at model shows, being reluctantly dragged around, which I recognised from my mum, who used to accompany my dad and I when I used to go and see my parents, and we used to go around these things. My mum had no real interest in models, but obviously supported by dad, she knew what sort of things he liked, all that kind of stuff. And you saw a similar sort of thing. But now we are, I think, starting to see a similar shift to, because I also have done miniature painting, that whole war games miniature painting side, which is much more, I mean, it has always been male dominated. It's still male dominated. It has a lot more women in the hobby than scale modeling does. But I think that's been changing gradually. I don't know. What's your, am I just seeing things, or do you think there are more women getting into modeling now?
No, I don't think you're just seeing things. I think we've always been there in the shadows. But I'm not going to lie, I've never known really many of any other female modelers. But when I spent a couple of weeks up at Cosford again just recently on a promotion course, and I went to the Cosford Model Club, because most RAF bases have a quiet little model club hidden away in a back room. We don't like to admit it because we're seen as being horrid little geeks. And there were two other women turned up. So imagine my surprise, and they were both long-suffering wives, actually. Their husbands do what we all do, and they thought, well, instead of complaining about it, why don't I give it a go? And they're enjoying it. There are a few women that pop up on my channel that speak to me. Some of them, in the comments that are obviously female, and others get in touch. But there's not many. Still, it's not many. I just think maybe with the way the world is changing, in terms of everybody being accepting of everything, maybe those that do model are a little bit less unsure about sort of coming out of the woodwork, as it were.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of true with modelers in general, I feel. I think, geek chic, as it's often been termed in sort of, I guess, mainstream news, has been something, I guess, for the past 15 years or so. I think the popularity of things like Dungeons and Dragons, from about 2016, the rise of 3D printing, and I think social media as well, has made all these things seem much more, for want of a better word, acceptable.
And accessible.
Whereas, before people would have been like, nerds. Whereas now it's kind of like, we aren't even close to the far end of the spectrum anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe it's that.
Imagine the female of my youth having to run the gamut of old men in the model shop.
Yeah.
Nowadays that still exists, but you can get everything online. There's 3D printing and modelling as a whole, not just scale aircraft modelling, which is what most of us do. Modelling as a whole is just so much more mainstream now. All the other little sides and offshoots to it. And again, you don't necessarily have to fight your way through the crowds of middle-aged men and the inevitable comments to access the stuff because of the internet and clubs and everything else. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that's the thing.
Yeah. Once again, chat, if you have any comments, questions, please put them in big bold letters like question. As always, most of you know the drill, but if you're new here, you put big question in capital letters, it's quite difficult to monitor the chat whilst you're also chatting. Well, it might be easy for Jen, but I'm a man, so I can't do multitasking. I can only focus on one thing at once. I know my strengths. It's not multitasking. So yeah, it just helps draw attention. It means I don't miss stuff, because I would like to get any questions that you do have out, rather than have them buried away there. Okay, so that being said, as I say, I come from a modelling dad with a modelling mum, long suffering. I've now got a model shop. I do see people come through the shop, and it's pretty male dominated, but quite often women will come in, often buying stuff for their husbands. But again, that's something that I don't think my mum would have ever done. Gone into a shop to buy something for my dad. I mean, I would say she's still alive, but my dad isn't, so she wouldn't do it now, obviously. But I mean, and you mentioned that kind of going through the. I mean, I wish there were crowds of middle-aged men in my shop. That'd be great for business. But is there a kind of an intimidation bit there, on
sure.
from a female side of a wall of bearded men?
100%. I'm not going to lie. I'm not bothered. I never have been. I've never seen myself as being any different than anybody else. Clearly, I'm a lady. Obviously, I get that part, and there's no silliness there. But I personally have never thought I can't go in there because there's only men in there. But that's not to say that I haven't been subjected to some of the obvious remarks now and again. But again, it's never been something that really bothers me, because I see it as being a them problem, not a me problem.
Yeah.
But that's me, and I'm, I think, well, I know that an awful lot of females don't think that way, and would be intimidated by it. One of my other major things that I like to do is ride motorbikes, and it's the same story there, obviously. And it's the same story meeting other females that ride bikes. It's always the same things that they're worried about, and that is one of them. I'd like to think nowadays that's less of a thing across the board.
I mean, I think motorsports in general, but I mean, especially bikes. I mean, I think of the people that I know that are into motorbikes, it's probably about a 50-50 split. Maybe,
getting that way now, yeah.
Maybe 55-45, but there are a lot of women who are into their bikes.
When I started riding bikes, you couldn't even really buy biking gear for ladies.
Really? Wow.
Really, and now there are shops dedicated to females, female riding kit, because obviously we aren't shaped quite the same.
Well, and it is a great untapped market for those areas that haven't previously, catered for women, or like seen women as much. You make up slightly more than 50% of the population. Indeed. So, if you're only catering or only marketing to men, you're effectively saying, I don't care about 50% of the population's money, which seems odd for any business, to be honest. Coming from a commercial background, it's like, why would you do that?
Yes.
It's like, yes, there is a demographic for certain things, but then one of the things in retail, obviously, is, well, how do we make this product appeal to a wider market?
And initially with motorcycling gear, and I'm going to use that because it really doesn't transfer to models particularly, but initially with motorcycle gear, they appeal to the female market by putting pink on things.
Yeah.
And I saw your face then, and that's exactly what most women do. It's like, oh, really? Come on. They're like the best you could do. But clearly, airfix aren't going to start putting pink boxes out there for ladies. That would be ridiculous. So it's a tricky one, actually. I don't know how a modelling manufacturer or a retailer would go about trying to appeal more to women. I don't know.
Well, I've thought about this a bit, as my brain tends to think about random subjects. Those in the chat will know. We often go off on mad tangents on this, by the way.
We like tangents, they're good.
Just wait till John Alec or anybody else joins. So I think so there's a couple of things. So my educational training, rather than my commercial experience, is as a biologist, life science. That's the background I trained in. And then when I finished training, I went completely into commercial. But as a biologist, there are certain things, there's always a Gaussian distribution curve of these things. But generally, men are more interested, the average man, if you sample 1,000 men, more of them will be interested in things. And if you sample 1,000 women, more of them will be interested in people. And that is partially down to our evolution, the brain structure, our cultural norms and things. And obviously, we make models of things. And a lot of them are military things, which again are a more, male kind of aggressive, defensive, that kind of thing. So do you think subject is one of those things? And, a lot of women just see it as, oh, it's another plane or it's another, tank, which is a box with a gun on it, rather than it being something that, might be more appealing.
Yeah, I think there would be an element of that because, again, most of the female models I've come across actually do things like figure modeling.
Yeah.
And like you say, the gaming side of things, quite a few women do that. And the lady I met at CrossFit made little scenes, little dioramas of sort of the one she brought with her was a little bric-a-brac shop, and she'd made the inside of this shop. So you looked into it like a picture frame, but it went back and it got all this stuff in it. It's a very female-y sort of thing if you think about it.
Yeah.
So yes, I think subject matter could have some impact on it. But what you're saying makes a lot of sense to me, actually.
Well, because one of the things that I would love Airfix to bring back as a classics range are their figures and the birds. Yeah, I would. I mean, purely from a selfish point of view, not particularly. It's just like, oh, this would appeal to women. But I think, nature models have, like dinosaur models, the ones that Tamiya do. Anybody can do those. It doesn't matter. Kids can do them, adults can do them. Women and women. There's no kind of bias in that. It's a dinosaur. Everybody has dinosaurs, right? I just think, because they used to do Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, and
did, yes.
the Lancers and all that kind of stuff. I know because my dad did those as well. But again, it's more of the, I guess, the human element, and again, getting historical stuff in there as well. I don't think they were actually very good models, but
they're terrible. The birds are absolutely dreadful. And ironically, if I can use that way, the other female at CrossFit that was making a model was desperately trying to figure out how to paint a blue tit. One of the airfix blue tits.
Yeah.
What colour is a blue tit's bottom, is what she said. And no one knew. And can you find a reference photograph of a blue tit's bum?
I think they're kind of a yellowy brown.
Yellowish, whitish, we don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a reasonable point to make. And with the way Airfix are re-releasing those vintage classics, it might be something they could think about, and they could market it that way.
Because I think I was certainly surprised at how successful the Shannon class lifeboat was as a pre-order. Now, slightly separate note, Airfix / Hornby are really screwing up the delivery of that. I have a delivery for the shop tomorrow. It's only a part shipment.
Right.
So I have to communicate to all my customers. If you've ordered one, people on chat, they'll all come on the 10th of July. The initial shipment that they've sent has been spread across small retailers. So they haven't given full orders to anybody, it seems. They've so I don't know. It's just I got a delivery notification today, and it's just yes, 3 Shannon class life, and 3. It's I think there's 9. It's just got in touch with the rep, and he was yeah. It's just the first lot are going to be distributed amongst small retailers, and then everybody will get them on the 10th. It's just how does that make sense? What you knew about this? There were pre-orders. We gave you these numbers ages ago. Anyway, complete aside, I was really surprised because it is the most successful pre-order from Airfix this year in the shop. It just overtook the Fairy Delta 2 as well, which was the other one that was really popular. But the Shannon class, it's not a military vehicle.
Nope.
It's a boat, which is actually probably the least popular type of model if you're going to go for categories of modeler. And yet it's had great appeal. So, I think that releasing, I'm going to say slightly unusual subjects, not another Spitfire, but, something which is, what was the word? I think recognizable. Everybody can relate to something like that. A lot of people will have seen the lifeboats or had experiences of them, hopefully not personal experiences. If they have, I hope they were pleasant, but maybe that expansion of range would actually encourage people who, men and women, but particularly women, who have been on the fringes, hesitating and thinking, well, yeah, but I mean, I've had people come into the shop, looking at things, and their kids are looking at stuff, and the mum has been like, it's all a bit war-y, isn't
it? Yeah.
Which again, I would have said in the early noughties would have been not the flavour of the month. It seems we are going backwards, but it's still not politically, a very kosher thing, I guess. And that kind of, I guess it's the image of glorification of war, isn't it? The assumption of it.
It's the assumption of glorification, I think, right? Yeah. I certainly don't see it that way. Interestingly, my daughter, who's just turned 12 and previously shown zero interest in anything remotely engineering, mechanical, or modelling, has suddenly decided that she is into modelling and things, and she suddenly likes going and seeing airplanes with me, which makes me very happy. But we went to the Airfix Model World show at NEC recently, and the one thing that she picked out that she wanted on that day was the Shannon class lifeboat.
Really?
Which we couldn't get on that day because it wasn't released at that point. But that's the one thing that she said if she could have anything from the show on that day, it would be that.
2 weeks' time, Jeff.
Well, I've asked Dale if he'll send me one, but I've not heard back yet.
Right, there's a question here which I've kind of been holding off because it kind of very vaguely relates to the question of subject. But Steve says, spotted a kit in a charity shop today. Would you buy a kit from a charity shop and hope all the parts are there, or would you avoid it thinking it might not be complete? Go on, Jen, I'll let you go first.
I'd just check it in the shop.
Yeah.
And depending what it is, I might buy it anyway, because you do hear tales of people buying kits for outlandishly low prices in charity shops, and it might be worth £2 for half a kit to some of us.
Yeah.
Spares box get a big injection.
Yeah, depending on what it was, Steve, absolutely. My inclination would be I would probably buy it unless, like Jen said, I'd ask to check it, and obviously if it's half missing, still might buy it because it might, there might be a place for it. But especially as a YouTuber, there's always something that you can make out of something. But even so, spares, paint mule, whatever, would depend on the price, obviously. But it's a charity, so probably, yeah. And also related as on the subject side, again, kind of hold off till we talked about that a little bit. Craig says, which models do you enjoy building the most, Jen? Armor, aircraft, figures. It's because there's no punctuation, Craig. Get your punctuation in.
Yes, punctuation is important.
Yeah.
Predominantly aircraft, because that's what I'm the most interested in. I love aeroplanes, and I have done from a very early age. Again, don't really know why, but I do. So predominantly aircraft, and kits that are good. I like a model kit that's a good kit, no matter what the subject is. Trying to think wildly, like Tamiya motorcycles, for instance, are just beautiful kits to build and to work on, even if you don't like the subject that much. The models that I've made the least over the years is figures. I've done very, very little figure modelling. And trucks. I've never yet made a truck. Like a lorry, not an army lorry. I've made army lorries. I've never made a shiny lorry, like a Scania.
Like Eddie Stobart kind of.
Exactly, and I have a sort of inkling that I'd really like to do that at some point. But I will build anything, to be honest.
Yeah, I've never done a truck either. I used to have the first model club I went to when I came. The first time I came back, so my second stint at modelling. The North Staffs Model Club, not IPMS affiliated. Great bunch of guys. They were all guys. One of them was a trucker, and he made trucks. I'm just like, but for me, it's just like I make models of things that I could never hope of. I would aspire to. I'd love to fly in a Messerschmitt 262.
Yeah.
It would be fantastic. I'd love to fly in a Spitfire. Chances are unlikely. But a truck, I could probably get a truck.
Probably
I've
get a
seen
good look around
trucks,
the truck. Yes.
so they don't have that appeal. But if you're working with them, like in the army, you get a lot of army guys. I get a lot of people actually coming into the shop.
Tanks, don't they?
Yeah, I got a lot of people coming in from RNAS, the Overton. A lot of people have worked on Merlins. We want to think of a Merlin, and I kind of get that because it's like making a model of a car that you've owned.
Yes.
I
did go through a phase where I was trying to collect kits of everything that I'd ever personally worked on.
Yeah.
The different types as I've been through my career, but I never actually built a single one. So I don't. That's a lie. I have now managed to build one Hercules kit. So.
Oh, right.
I have done one, but that's it so far. So I've given up on that particular one.
What kit was that?
It was the Zvezda kit when it came out.
Is that 72nd scale?
Mm-hmm.
That's not an insubstantial aircraft in 72nd.
No, I built it for what's the name of the importers? I've forgotten. I do Tamiya as well.
The Hobby Company.
The Hobby Company. I built it for them. And Andy Farmer, he asked me to build it. They have a display that they take to various trade shows.
Right.
A small selection of modelers that they used to build various kits to put on there, and it was for that. So that's really the only reason it got built. I've got, I think, 5 currently in the old stasharoo. Then I've not managed to build another one yet. A couple of 3 years down the road.
Andy's my rep for the whole Hobby Company.
Yes.
Nice guy. A lot of other people coming in. Dutch Dave, welcome. Lego did it. Lego did what? I missed the thread that went through. I can't see what it was. Let me know. Here we go. Another question. Jen, how is the vote going? Hope you get a great response to it.
The vote. The vote is surprising the heck out of me, Stuart. Yes. The votes between a Defiant, a Mustang, or a Wildcat for the next Modelling for Beginners series that I'm going to do. And I thought that the Mustang would win it hands down. It is winning, but not by very much at all. It's about 5 votes ahead at the minute of the Defiant, and the Wildcats had 1 vote.
Yeah, Wildcat.
Can you believe that? I can't believe it.
The Wildcat. So for me, the Wildcat and the Hellcat are, just different versions of each other, right? One's bigger. They look kind of similar, and they're just boring. Should I say that? Everybody, don't tell Moss, but the Bearcat is kind of the same.
It's like a sports Hellcat, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, the GTR model.
And the other point about that, to answer Stuart's question more completely, is that a lot of people have said they'd actually prefer to see the Defiant built, but they realise that the P51 kit is going to give better opportunity for more varied things to be shown. Because you've got natural metal finish, you've got silver finish, you've got camouflage, you've got weathering, you've got stripes and a yellow nose and yada, yada, yada. So it's a better canvas for the project of having a beginner build than the Defiant is, but they'd actually rather see that built. If they hadn't voted for the Mustang, the Defiant would be winning, which staggers me, actually.
So there we go, everyone. If you want to skew that vote, if you're Wildcat fans,
it's a bit late for the Wildcat. I think that's just out.
But head on over to Jen's channel and have a look at that. A couple of people have mentioned lady bikers, as opposed to hairy bikers. One of them died fairly recently, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
One of the hairy bikers. I got their cookbook. It's pretty good. The first one, I didn't. Kind of lost interest after that. And most could outride a lot of men. Yeah, I think that's again, the kind of myth of bad women drivers comes from that incidence. So there's a couple of things, right? It's statistics is one. There were more men, right, around, so you're more likely, and again, men on that Gaussian curve generally have better spatial awareness than women do. Again, we are slightly biologically different. We do have slightly different strengths in general. Now, that isn't to say there aren't, women drivers who could outdrive 99% of men because they're out on the curves, or that men are just terrible drivers, and I've encountered both. It's just, again, that random sample of 1,000, you could get slightly different distributions. So the fact that not very many women were into bikes, statistically,
skews it a bit, doesn't it?
It skews it horribly. And that kind of also comes back to the topic before, of subject. And you mentioned, Jen, Tamiya bikes. I got some Tamiya bikes in the shop, and they sold pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And again, with more women coming into the hobby, people often want to model something that they own, and it's quite a big driver for a lot of people who aren't modelers.
Yes.
Who come in saying, I've got a Yamaha or whatever. I quite like to make a model of it. Do you have one? That kind of thing.
Yes.
Nobody's ever said that about a Yamaha yet, but it's an example, right?
Yeah.
It tends to be cars that people generally ask that. Generally obscure ones that you can't get.
Yes, always, yeah. I had a friend of a friend asked me to build him a model of his race car, and it was, I can't even remember what it was, a Seat something or other, and it's like, I'd love to, but there is no kit of a Seat, a racing Seat Ibiza or something, I don't know. So, yeah, no, there's, funnily enough, isn't a kit of that, sorry. Yeah.
Funny enough, I had a chap come into the shop quite a while ago, a couple of months ago, and looking for a large scale, like 1/16, 1/18, but even 1/24 would be okay, he said. Mercedes Sprinter van, which is the most common box van. You can't get them.
No.
They don't exist. There was a company that made some. They don't make them anymore. It's just like, that's just mad to me. He wanted it in diecast, and diecast was actually where we found the ones that aren't anymore produced. But if you wanted to make a model of one, you can't. I was astonished by that.
And yet you can make a model of a Komatsu digger,
or a fanciful Nazi bomber that didn't exist.
Yeah. A drawing on the back of a drawing of
Yes. Or a massive experimental American plane, which is a very clumsy segue to welcome John Alec, who is American. That's the only link I had there. Hey, John, how you doing?
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, yes. Sorry, it was so bright earlier. I was getting such a lot of backlighting that I looked completely in shadow, and so I had to turn up my lights, and now they're making me look like I'm yellow, so I'm just turning them down. How about in the States, John? What's it like over there? Do you see a lot of women getting into modeling now, or demographic changing? I mean, I know we got channels like Jess with Scale Model Snail, who I did ask, but unfortunately Wednesday's her busiest night, so she apologized.
Oh, that's too bad.
Not able to come on.
Would have been great to have her. Yeah, absolutely. So I think here in the States, we see there's some peripheral hobby activity, right? So folks are into, diamond dot, even yarn stuff. And there's this really pleasant sort of crosstalk between the modeling community and those other communities, right? And so it's great. It's very refreshing. I haven't been to a model show in a really long time, so I couldn't tell you about any, sort of long-suffering, folks that come into it. I think that, our generation is, we're kind of much more accepting. Not accepting. I think when you're dealing with old folks, when modeling was just really kind of strictly talking the 50s and 60s, where modeling was really strictly a kind of a guy thing. There was sort of that those gender silos, right, where boys did models and girls did whatever. And I think that for us, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, or whatever, we sort of didn't have that mindset, right? And so for us, it at least for me, it's perfectly natural to have women who are doing modeling, scale modeling, doing that. And I think we should, be as welcoming and as encouraging as possible, because it is refreshing. You do have what we call, so in peer review, we call them Gandalf the Greys, right? So not having,
careful, I'm getting there.
Not having that, it's just so it is really refreshing. So having people like Jen and Jess and that yeah. And I see zero. I see zero pushback. There's apparently, there are still some, folks, guys out there. Oh no, I don't want my wife getting into it because this is just my hobby. And where I've tried to get my wife into it for all the time. Come join me. Get her into diamond dot, get her into something that where she can kind of join me in the hobby. So there's, go ahead.
It was a very silly, not comment, kind of a real life thing. I don't know. I'm on the fast bit, so my brain is starved of glucose. So I'm the same, right? I'd love if Maria was into modeling, it'd be great, because there's a common language there and stuff. But again, I kind of get people wanting their own separate thing as well. But you can't force that, you just naturally end up in that, I find, it's just like if you're into film and the other person isn't, well, then you have some time with film and the other person does whatever they do. You need your away time as well. And then you have common interest, otherwise you probably wouldn't be together. But Maria, the only interest she showed in video, she said, well, I could do some unboxing stuff for you, I could wear a sexy outfit. And I'm just like, that's not really helping with the stereotype thing. It's just like people are going to assume I've asked you to do that because she likes dressing up and stuff, and it's just like, that's not, no, we're not at that channel stage yet. It's just like,
I'm sorry that Mr. Lol.
Yeah.
It distresses me when the few females that do get involved with this, and you see them on YouTube, how many of them feel that it's necessary to have the camera pointing this way and have the bra on and all the rest of it. I mean, I could do that, but I refuse, because my modelling channel is about modelling. It's not about me.
Exactly.
and I'm not going to use these assets to promote it. I want them, it's about that. And it really upsets me. It doesn't upset me. It's just one of those things that makes me roll my eyes a bit, like, please, you're going to get a lot of views, don't get me wrong, but you're going to lose a lot as well, because people are actually interested in what you're doing. They're going to be like, no, I'm not,
No,
Completely
you've got to
agree
know
with you.
your audience.
Yeah.
What sort of audience do you want? Do you want modelers, or do you just want people just coming a bit,
I mean,
clickbaiting because it's
arguably I could earn more doing it the other way.
I've suggested she starts an OnlyFans, but
I think I'll stay away from that. Steer clear.
I did say as long as I get 50%. So
I want shares. Yeah.
Interesting comment here from Adrian. I see more women in the Gundam and anime plastic model communities, which I've always found really puzzling, right? And I think you're right, John. My Gen X brain, right? We grew up. Well, I mean, I grew up in the UK with Margaret Thatcher as extremely powerful woman. Regardless of what you thought of her politics, she was a very strong woman. The 80s, which had women in positions of power. You had them in film. Really strong leading roles. Ripley in Aliens and stuff. And then to see Gundam and anime, which is, and I can't watch anime really. It's some people have said, "Oh, you got to watch this anime," and I'm just like, really, and the caricatures of people, male and female, but especially female, to me are just like, how do women watch this and not feel like wrong? It's just,
I agree.
I don't get it, which is then puzzling when you see more women in that community. That's a mystery for me. Yeah, I agree. We should start a petition, I think. Send it to Dale. Bring back the airfix birds. I want a 1-to-1 scale kingfisher.
Don't
even
do
if
it,
it is
guys.
80% filler.
Careful what you wish for. They're so bad.
Well, Ms. Modeler did do the owls and said you were like 80% filler by the time she finished. So.
Oh yeah, the owl. I remember that.
Yeah. I mean, you can still get them, but they're pretty rare and they're pretty expensive. And
for what they are, yes, they're quite expensive now. If you can find any, definitely. So you might attract a few more females to buy them, but you'll lose them to modelling forever because they're such awful kits.
Yes, yeah, that's a good point. But I mean, they're retooling lots of things. I mean, so on your poll, is the Mustang you're doing, is it the new starter kit or is it the 2012 kit?
It's the 48th one, the Airfix 48th.
Oh, it's the 48th one. Oh, okay.
And it's the Airfix 48th Defiant. So they're both Airfix kits. That isn't a deliberate thing. Like I said in my video, I'm not sponsored by Airfix or anything. It's just that I picked the P51 up for a really good price, and I already had the Defiant, which I bought second hand. So it was just with one eye on people kind of buying one to follow along, which a lot of people did with the Mosquito. Is the availability of the P51's really good. Not so much again with the Defiant, but if it's what people want, then I'll do it.
I think that's another. Well, I mean, again, tangent we're going off on, but the policy. One of the things I don't get about Airfix particularly, I think Airfix do this a lot, but other manufacturers do it as well. Italieri do it. Revell not so much because they're parts basically. They'll do anything. But Airfix will make a kit, like a new tool. They'll produce it for 18 months, 2 years maybe, and then they'll withdraw it. They'll stop making it for a couple of years or 3 years or something. And I'm just like, and I still get, I still see people wanting that missed it in that time because, 2 years sounds a long time, but it goes by like that, and the Defiant's a good one. I'd love to do a 48 scale Airfix Defiant, but it's eBay really. or a lucky find, in a small shop tucked away, under something. So, yeah, I don't get that. Why don't they? Unless it's okay. I can think of reasons why.
Yeah.
Warehousing space is one. But if you've got a constant demand, I don't know.
I don't know for sure, but I think they got burnt with a few things that they brought out going back a few years now. And they ended up with the warehouses full of certain kits that they thought would sell and they didn't. And I don't think actually Airfix are the only people that do this, because Revel are really bad for it as well. And I think it just makes more sense, monetarily speaking, to do a reasonable run that will sell and stop there and carry on with the next thing and then come back when the demand is back there again. I think that's probably why they do it. But that's not
I'm sure.
That's me guessing.
No, I think you're right. I think it's again, coming from a commercial background, that's just poor commercial forecasting and monitoring of your demand. If you really know what is selling, because you've got a certain production, like initial production run, 5,000, 10,000, whatever that is, and you'll expect to sell all of those, and sometimes it will and sometimes it won't, depending on how well the kit's been accepted, how well your marketing's done, everything. But if those are going along at a nice click, you would expect that when you're getting down to say 30% stock, that you might say, okay, we'll do another top-up run of a couple of thousand.
Yeah.
Given that over this, over the last 6 months, 18 months, there'll be a curve that goes off. Okay, and we'll take the back part of the curve. So we predict another 2,000 over the next 2 years, or 1,000 over the next year. Add that on to the next production schedule. Get out this tooling, presses off another 1,000. Jobs are good. And that doesn't happen. So, the Victor, the Handley Page Victor is a recent example. I sold one in the shop, and the shop's only been open since September. I sold one in the shop, went to reorder it, and I couldn't get it. And it's like, oh, okay. Guess I'm not selling Victors then, so I don't have them. Because it was quite nice as a display, having the 3 V bombers, the Vulcan, the Victor, and the Valiant. The Valiant's there for a long time. I've sold Vulcans, sold Victors. I can get Valiants, but I can't get Victor. So it's just like
they released that one, didn't they? And they just re-released the Vulcan, so logic would dictate that maybe they'll re-release the Victor quite soon.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, they'll probably release it as a K2, and it's like, no, I wanted the B2.
Logic, don't use that; it's dangerous.
Yeah, that's where I make my mistake. Oh dear. Right. Just looking through just to make sure. I'm not missing. Comment. There are a few things that are traditionally gender-based on both sides, but the barriers are coming down. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I have certain views on a lot of things, as people would know. I'm not a fan of the woke kind of mentality coming and forcing things, because realistically, men and women are different. You're not going to get 50% of nursing staff to be men. You're not going to get 50% of bricklayers to be women. There's no point forcing these things. That there is a natural thing. I get the whole. There should be access for everybody to take those positions. There shouldn't be any closed occupations. But you can't force equality. It has to find its own balance, where it needs to. But there should be equal opportunity for everybody, not equal opportunity of outcome. That's separate, different. World War II scale models. Dave, once again, thank you very much. Has gifted 5 Men's Model Moments memberships. You are a legend, sir. It's going to get to a stage where if you don't do it one week, we're going to notice. But thank you very much. June also makes a very good comment, which I was going to come on to. So it's a really nice segue, in that Sully recently did a video where his wife, who she admits herself has no real interest in modelling, they actually popped into the shop several months ago. It was really nice to meet them both.
Cool.
And as well, particularly Brits do, we're joking around the whole thing. But Sully convinced her to make her first airfix model. It was an F-35. She did a good job of it. And it's a great kit to introduce somebody to the hobby with. Counter to your point, Jen, about the birds being terrible kits to possibly introduce somebody to the hobby. The airfix F-35 starter kit is a fantastic way to get somebody into the hobby. So whether it will be the first of many or it's just going to be a one-off, who knows? But I think the opportunity to try something,
Sure,
is what you should be aiming at.
What you just said really resonates with me about the whole, you're never going to get 50% of the nursing staff community to be men. I think that equal opportunity is something that has to be there, but also realistically, I think it has been for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
But like you say, forcing it for the sake of hitting quotas and hitting numbers is pointless and idiotic, and we'll just end up with a lot of unhappy people in the wrong jobs. I've seen it at the minute with the forces. They're pushing to get women into engineering, women into the pilot seats and things like that. Nobody's stopping to think that maybe women don't want to be engineers, and that's why there are more women engineers. And they're doing silly things like opening jobs to women that traditionally haven't been and probably shouldn't be, like, let's say, firemen or regiment gunners, things like that. Women shouldn't be in those positions because we are different, like you say, physically. Can a woman climb up a ladder and climb back down again with an adult casualty over her shoulder? Yeah, some women could, maybe, but not most women. And this is the stupid part of it. And you use the word woke. I really, really wholeheartedly disagree with that movement. I think that the access should be there for all, but I believe it already is. I don't receive anywhere near as many comments now as I used to. The whole, nice model with the suffix for a girl.
Yeah.
That doesn't really happen anymore. I get recognised for what I do, and who I am isn't part of it. And that's how I think it should be with modelling. And I think actually the majority of modellers are very accepting of that nowadays.
Yeah. I think Luke put it very well actually on Airfix and Chill. I think it was on Monday actually, John. I unfortunately wasn't on, but I did watch it. So
you were watching the Spain match. Yeah, that's what you're.
I wasn't. His comment really resonated with me. Is that there are those people in the hobbies. And he said, let's not call them rivet counters because that's not a great association. They're arseholes. There are a small percentage of arseholes in the hobby because there are a small percentage of arseholes in the world. And unfortunately, they like to make themselves, they're very loud. They tend to talk over people and, shout their opinions, thinking that is debate, and crying when their arguments go wrong. And you get them in all political spectrums, in all countries, in all walks of life. And you just have to ignore them, and we have to do our best to ignore them. And if we see them doing it for the people, to call it out, they're arseholes, and you get arsehole bullies, you get arsehole keyboard warriors. There's a different flavors. There's probably different species of them, like blue tits and things. But yeah, they're not representative of the general modelling community, or the community at large. So Julian, I'm a little bit behind with the comments. Obviously, this goes back to the chat we were having before. Yes, Maria does know that I do need to concentrate, and people should be concentrating on the modelling rather than her, if she was to appear in any of my videos. So she won't. Although she occasionally appears on Airfix and Chill when she very kindly comes up to give me a sandwich or something if I haven't eaten. So,
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That
It's
doesn't
rare.
happen here, man.
It's rare.
That's all right.
Taggers, RE Airfix stock, Hornby London stock market statement. We closed the year in loss-making position, and both net debt and inventory are still too high. Yeah. I mean, Airfix have been one of my big disappointments this year. I always say big disappointments, but they've been disappointing for me this year in a number of ways. Part of that's from the retail side, from the trade side, and how they're organized. And I mean, I did my video on fixing Airfix, right? I could suggest certain things if they wanted to hire me as a consultant to improve that. I put a lot of it out in the video. If they actually wanted it from a nitty-gritty point of view, I charge for that. I think I'm now up to Powell, I didn't see you pop in. Welcome, my friend. Jen, John, Alec, share thoughts on pre-shading. Yeah, we had a discussion a little while ago with Jamie from Scale Modeling Cafe. Can't be on tonight, unfortunately, because he's ill. About pre-shading. What are your thoughts, Jen? Do you pre-shade?
Pretty much mirror Jamie's, actually, to be honest with you. Jamie and I are quite good friends, know each other fairly well. I see it like every other thing. It's a tool.
Yeah. It's
a tool in an arsenal of techniques and tools that we have available to us. And I think that used, I can't say correctly, because we all do things while we want to do them. That's the whole point of the hobby. You're here to enjoy it, not to please everybody else. If it's overdone or done badly, yeah, it kind of looks pants. But if you do it with a little bit more subtlety and, a bit more care, it can look really, really good. And it can be used as a good way to replicate texture on a surface of an aircraft, which is hard to do in a small scale. So yeah, I do appreciate, probably not, I don't appreciate in the way that everyone else does. I don't draw lines all over the model and then paint over them. I do it as part of the colouring in process. Because if you spray the lines first and then start putting your camo over it and what have you, if you make any mistakes and you have to do any little refills, little repaints, you lose it, it's gone. You've got an area of the model which hasn't got that effect anymore, and it's hard to put it back. Whereas if you do it whilst you're doing the painting, so I essentially lay a base colour and then I'll use a dark and a light colour to apply the shading and effects and then blend it. That way you're in complete control at all times of how much of that effect is left showing. It's a bit more involved, yes, but ultimately it's a really good way of learning to use your airbrush properly as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And actually that segues into a point I did want to make about females and modelling, is we can be really, really good at it. Because I think that the fine motor control and fidelity and, dare I say, attention to detail are things that women are very, very good at. And yeah, I think be careful what you wish for, because if too many women come into the hobby, you might find yourself getting eclipsed pretty quickly.
Well, I think also, I mean, you mentioned colour there, working on colour.
Yeah.
A lot of women are a lot better at colour matching, colour shading, and you only have to think about, I mean, I think about, shopping for things with my ex, where it's just like, well, what about this? And my ex was just like, no, that won't go with that thing. It's like,
it's the wrong colour.
But it's grey. Yeah, but it's the wrong grey. It's like, is it? I think male colour memory is again, on the Gaussian curve, generally worse. I mean, human colour memory is actually not great anyway. But yeah.
There's a dog.
Oh yes, this is
Zoe, the ice muncher. Yeah.
Ice.
She loves
loves
ice.
Ah,
Oh,
cheap treat.
she just loves to come in and get her and get petted and scratched, and that's her couch behind me. That's where she is all the time. Yes, I don't have anything.
I have a much smaller dog, if you can call it that. But you won't see him on screen unless Maria is away in Barcelona, or it's the daytime. Because if Maria's here, I don't exist.
Pablo.
Pablo, yeah. Pablo, the scale model dog. He's about 6 kilos. He's like a big cat.
Yeah,
Well, not even a big cat.
a moderately large cat.
Yeah, a medium cat. But he's hairless. So
Yeah, it's like
So-
50 pounds. Wow. Yeah.
wow. Any other thoughts on pre-shading, Jarek?
So I do it as well, and I guess it's not technically called pre-shading because I don't say like use black or dark lines to make the lines. I typically will cover the surface in Mr. Surfacer 1500 black, and then I go into the panels and I guess it's called like what, pre-highlighting, you know, and so I'll color modulate, and I do the same as Jen. I try to modulate with the paints themselves. So I'll use lighter hues and darker hues. So I'll take the base color and I'll add, you know, a gray or a white, usually not a white, like a gray. And then to make it dark, you can add, you know, like a dark green or a, you know, black as an extreme or whatever. And especially on armor, I think it works fantastic. And I do it with airplanes as well. And I agree, it has to be subtle. So, you know, if you're looking at an aircraft and you can see every line perfectly, it's a little extreme. But the pre-shading, even if it's not 100% accurate to what we see in real life, it makes the model interesting. And you know, it's you appreciate a few models, and your airbrushing skills go way up, right?
Yeah.
So I do it as well all the time.
I mean, it's funny actually because I tend to use pre-shading again, like you, John. I'll do marbling, so I tend to highlight the panel lines I want to, because again, it's not about, you know, like Jen said, you know, drawing all the lines on the model. It's highlighting what you want to. Again, depending on where it is, what it's going to be covered by, not necessarily in black. I usually use a dark gray, actually, and then so I usually start with a gray primer, so a mid-tone, and I'll go with a darker gray to where I want to add shadow, which isn't necessarily on the panel lines. And then I'll marble in with a lighter gray, and then go over that. I tend to only do that on aircraft. And I tend to use what I call post shading, you know, so starting from a darker base on a vehicle, and then working up through the highlights, you know, diluting the color with whatever I need to get that color interest. So it's funny because I tend to use pre-shading on aircraft and post-shading on, not exclusively, you know, it's a Venn diagram, but it's just what I got used to, I guess, because I learned a lot of the techniques. You know, nothing's original under the sun, of course, and the techniques I learned were all off much better modelers than me. And because I learned aircraft and vehicle modeling of the techniques of different people, I kind of followed them and got used to it. It's kind of muscle memory almost. And I don't really have that with cars. So what I do with cars is anybody's guess. Question from Colin Berry. Do you think the model market is oversaturated? Interesting question.
With what?
Yeah, it is
With
a very
access
broad
with
question.
projects, yes, probably. With kits, not really.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, in any capitalist environment which we exist in, if you overproduce, if you oversaturate, it will naturally cull itself. It's like nature, right? If you get too many predators, eventually there's not enough to sustain the predators because they overpredate. You get the best prey survive. The predators then go through a massive population slump. The prey increases again. Only this time they're slightly faster, and that's how things gradually, get better and better through evolution. And it's the same with the commercial market, right? If you're making terrible kits at high prices, you're not going to have a great company lifetime. So these things will always balance out. And if you look at, just go to Scalemates, look at any kit manufacturer that was, been going for 15, 20 years, or look at kit manufacturers that were around in 2000 and see, just look at the company info and see how many of them survived. Because a lot of them haven't, they now exist as other companies because they've been bought. Think of Ari, ARII, Japanese manufacturer, made some really nice kits. They don't exist anymore. But some of their molds have been purchased by a company I can't remember the name of. Think of Round 2 with all the stuff that they're doing with the, some of the old, is it MPC models? No, MPC, these are known.
Yeah, MPC's
AMT, is it? And
AMT and MPC.
Yeah.
It's one is owned by Round 2. Maybe they're both owned by Round 2.
I think MPC is separate. I think MPC is still doing their own stuff, isn't it? I think AMT, and it's like, oh God, some of the other ones, like some of the old Aurora kits, and those are doing around.
Yeah,
Mobius as well. It's trying to figure out. So if you ever want to do a video and have to do research on this, I mean, even look at Airfix, right? You might think it's straightforward. Airfix isn't a company. Airfix doesn't exist as a company, right? Airfix is a brand owned by Hornby. Hornby's the company. So Airfix only exists as a brand within Hornby, right? It's not a separate company. It's a separate part of Hornby. But all the figures, all the main stuff, which is where some of the problems come, like customer support, that's Hornby customer support. There isn't a separate Airfix one. It's never been owned by Hella. A lot of people talk about how in the Hella days, it's like, no, the company that owned them wasn't Hella. The company had bought Hella, who also went to administration before Airfix, and they used the Hella factory to tool both sets because it was underutilized and they didn't need another factory. And Kingston upon Hull got demolished. So it's really complicated trying to go out and sift out through all these companies because they rise and fall. And that kind of answers the question, right? So it'll find its own level. If you think we've got too much, then it'll level out.
Yeah.
But the model market has been increasing. The only decade, and we went over this in Beyond the Box, one of our fairly early episodes, the only decade model makers haven't increased the number of new tools that are going out is the 80s, when you had the introduction of other diversions for children or kids of, as I was going through that age, kind of 12 to 15 demographic, which traditionally was a pretty strong one in the 60s and 70s for model making. Suddenly they were all playing computer games, not doing models. And Airfix didn't have a company structure and was so bloated at that time that it couldn't adapt to those market conditions. The pound also strengthened lots of things. But so, yeah, I don't think it's oversaturated because there's still things that you can't get. I tried to find. So, John, I don't know if you've got any ideas on this, or Jen as well. I tried to find an STL file for some SU-27 exhaust nozzles, like the F-15 ones that we had.
Okay.
Right? Couldn't find them anywhere. And I'm doing it's the, I don't know if you know the company, it's a Chinese sort of rebranding company or retooling company called Mini Hobby Models. They do the really, I think it's basically they go through like Trumpeter's bin and find the old tools that they've thrown away because they were that knackered, and then they just kick them around a bit and then they re-inject them. So I'm doing a 1/48 scale SU-35. It's the old trumpeter kit from like 1999, I think. And even trumpeter, when they did it, because the SU-35 is the modernized flanker, or the super flanker, which was then sort of cut down a bit. But basically, to make it the super flanker and the version which had the canards at the front and the thrust vectoring nozzles at the back, is they gave you two little fillets to stick on the front, which don't blend into the fuselage at all. They just literally butt fix. So then there's a cavity where it goes into the old aerodynamic bit. Looks appalling. The same thing for the fins, because the fins were squared off. It's terrible. So it was a terrible kit to start with. And I imagine that's gone to, some third-party company, because Trumpeter didn't see any use in it because it was garbage, and sold it to these people. That's just terrible. So I thought, I'll just do some quick, 3D printed upgrades for it. Couldn't find them anywhere. So, is it saturated? Well, you still can't get some things. So I would say not. But maybe that's just me. I think you must have got interrupted, Julian, on your comment. I hope you're okay. I hope that's not, you weren't typing when climbing a ladder.
Jen, your channel is Genesis Designs and Modelcraft, right?
Yes.
All right, there it is. Yeah, I put it in earlier, and some folks were asking for it again, so I just put it in. Yep.
And I will put it in the description of the video. Obviously, after the live stream, when it becomes a video, I'll put it in there. So if you haven't had a chance to check it out before then, go and check it out. Some really nice builds on there. And some really good tutorials. Jen's just started doing a series, actually, not too long ago, on a beginner series in modeling, which is really nice, really worth checking out. Quick question from Steve. Could you please show an image of the cathedral my wife built? In your Discord. Alrighty ho. I shall, Steve. Whilst I'm doing that, I'll just put up Julian's actual comment.
Fair. Agreed.
Oh yeah, no, Facebook is terrible.
Facebook is a cesspool. It really is. The only place worse than it is Reddit.
I went in. I made the mistake. So I was I'm an old '80s headbanger, and I was in the Judas Priest Facebook group, and I made the mistake of putting my favorite Judas Priest albums in order, and it was just like I got crucified. Oh my God, how dare you appreciate Judas Priest differently than I, and it's the same thing. It was these old frickin' geezer, Gandalf the Greys that were, are you a kid who's, I'm like, no, dude, I'm 56, And so, I went to my first Priest concert 40 years ago, so Facebook it's terrible. Sorry.
Judas Priest is a blast from the past. A lot of my friends were into Judas Priest.
Anyways.
So let me just show. This is the cathedral that Steve's wife has made.
Oh my goodness.
Which is pretty phenomenal. That is a substantial and huge kit.
That's mind-blowing.
That's awesome.
I really hate the way StreamYard handles sharing things, because I have to share each of these separately. Oops. I just accidentally removed John and not the... He wasn't on camera at the time. Let me share the next one. I'm so used to better conference things for work when I was doing these things. I don't want to stop screen. I want to present. Thank you. Oh my God. Okay, finally, it's allowed me to do it. Here is some of that kit. So she must have the patience of a saint.
Good grief. That's like Lego gone horribly wrong, isn't it? Wow.
That is a lot. That's a lot of wood.
It's impressive.
And I think there was one more just to give a sense of scale to all of that. Here it is with is that a Switch? Nintendo Switch in the foreground there? That is pretty massive. Where on earth are you going to put that when it's finished?
Is it wood or plastic?
It's wood.
It's wood.
Oh
that is wood.
That's awesome.
That's incredible.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing, Steve. So do congratulate her on that project, because that is more than I would take on for sure.
I'm not surprised it took ages. Not surprised at all.
Oh, you want an ice cube? Look.
The way she comes in,
I don't give her too much. I try to space it out. But.
Black basing, yes, that's the term. So I tend to use black basing for AFBs.
Mm-hmm.
When there's a lot of shadow in areas that you want to look dark, under the tracks and stuff. It's easier to work up the color on the actual thing. Although I tend to not use black anymore, because black tends to desaturate the colors that you put on top.
Use a gray?
I try to use a really dark version of whatever color the tank is in.
Makes sense.
That's a good idea.
So go through the color of the tank. What about pre-shading with a hairy stick, not an airbrush? Possible with dry brushing? I mean, anything's possible. I mean, dry brushing is an incredibly powerful technique. There's a painter whose name I can't remember right now, but he's a mini painter, and he paints like award-winning, like competition-winning miniatures only using dry brush type techniques, including stippling and all this. There's an amazing amount of breadth to the technique. We kind of tend to only use a small fraction of it. So yeah, it's possible. Not necessarily recommended. In the same way that you can carve a hole in a wall with a spoon, but there are better tools available.
Fair. I think if you're brushing the model, it'd be, broadly speaking, impossible to make pre-shading work in the same way it does with an airbrush. You'd have to look at it as a method of post-shading rather than pre, so dry brushing a darker effect where you want it could certainly work without a doubt.
Yeah. Hairy stick, or hand brushing. You can use. I mean, actually, if you are a hand brusher, I would recommend going and watching. Again, I've mentioned the channels before, but channels like Squidmart, Miniat, Ninjon, Mini Paint, Marco Frisoni. If only for his outrageous accent, Marco Frisoni is worth watching. And he's also an incredibly talented painter.
Yeah.
But the kind of techniques they're using, it's all by brush, right?
Yeah.
Well, no, they do use airbrushing, but they can paint minis and often do purely with the brush. And a lot of the techniques they're using, they're techniques, right? They're not like with paints. There's nothing special about Panzer Ace's paint that makes it only suitable for a tank. It's a paint. It happens to be formulated to be similar to the color of whatever, but it's still just a paint. So likewise, the techniques we use are techniques. So you can use volumetric painting techniques on a tank. to greater or lesser effect, depending on a lot of things, the scale of the subject, what you're trying to achieve, your skill, what paints you're using, blah, blah, blah. One of the things it does do, and the reason that a lot of mini painters now are using airbrushes, especially in base coats and stuff, is airbrushes just make things faster.
Yeah.
They are, you can achieve a lot of the effects that you can with an airbrush, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them by using careful brush painting, glazing, various other techniques. But it takes a lot more time. So,
what blows my mind is the non-metallic metal stuff.
Yeah.
Where they use coloured paints to make metallic finishes. They don't use metallic paints; they use colours. That's incredible to see that. I'd like to see that IRL, to see it with my eyes, because I feel like it's one of those things that can work from one angle only. Potential.
Yeah, right.
A bit like when you paint headlights, airbrush headlights on a car, and you look at it from different ways, it doesn't work, but you look at it from just the right angle, it really works. But that does blow my mind, the way they can do that. That's remarkable.
Yeah. I can't remember which one of the ones I watch did it, but they painted, I think it was an Age of Sigmar, one of the Sigmarite, basically the Space Marines in ancient times kind of things. But wearing gold armor, glistening gold armor, not a single metallic on it, all done with, and it looked incredible.
It's mental, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
wizardry. Yeah.
I think it is kind of seen as the holy grail of painting.
It is a little bit. It's a figure painting thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay. Comment: AMT, MPC, Lindbergh, and Polar Lights. Thank you very much, DNA Scale Model Apprentice. Those are all the companies owned by Round 2. So MPC was one of them. Tagger says, saying about new tools, etc. I see the new tool Skyhawk, which was meant to be released in 2023, is still coming soon. Just a kit at the price it end for 172nd at €50 for a Skyhawk.
Who's doing that?
Yeah, who is that that's doing that, Taggers? Because the Skyhawk is not the A4, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a big plane.
And it's way down on my interest list.
Yeah. The only interest I would have is maybe doing an Argentinian one after being shot down.
Color, he says.
I remember going to school where the Falklands War happened. So, although I just saw, was it yesterday? Argentina is donating, was it 5 super etendards to Ukraine that were used in the Falkland Wars.
Okay.
And it's still going. So I'm not sure if that's a like to help the Ukrainians or the Russians.
It's more likely to hinder them than help them. Those things are ancient, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, it's impressive that they're French and they still work.
Fair.
Speaking of somebody who has owned a French car once, that will be the only time. I'm not sure I'd get in something that flew.
Did it have 4 years?
Oh dear. Another thing, I just want to quickly just check so I know more questions, but I don't see any. So another question for you, Jen. I have, and speaking of Ukraine, actually, that was a segue and I didn't even realize it. See, my brain is ahead of my actual talking somewhere in there. So ICM a while ago released this set.
Yes.
This is the War Has No Gender
Right.
set of figures. And ICM make really, really nice figures.
Okay.
If you're into figures, into dioramas, they do make some really, really nice figures. But there was a bit of a small kerfuffle, as most things tend to be on the internet, about whether the portrayal was sexist or not. What do you think, Joan? I have a particular view, but I don't want to sully it.
How?
Your
No, I don't think so. I think they were just. I think the biggest takeaway there is that you have, just like there is in many countries, including Israel, you have women warriors, and so it's the same in the United States, and we're different, and they're just. So for me, the takeaway from that was you've got these women warriors who are defending their country, and they're just kind of doing their own thing. And it might be a little bit different than what you might, capture. Guys take selfies. You know what I mean? It's not a.
Oh, is that the thing, the selfie?
Yeah, I think.
Okay,
I've
so
not
the thing
seen it.
was that these two, if we
Yeah.
can show it there without the glare from these two, this one has a little dog that they've saved, and they're taking a selfie.
Right, for the Insta, right?
Yeah.
But that didn't bother me, man. It
No.
just didn't bother me.
I think
It's
people
fine. They're just
kind
doing
of
their own
miss
thing.
the fact that these two are operating a drone, which for me is the defining. If we look at conflicts,
yeah.
and I'm sure history will probably, hopefully, prove the veracity of this long after I'm gone. But the Ukrainian conflict will be. It's really the first conflict where drones and
Superstars.
unmanned systems have really been the forefront of the conflict. They've been the game changer. Russia's had to adapt to that. Russia really wasn't at the same level as Ukraine at all, and has had to buy in third party, the Shahed drones and stuff, to react to it and adopt those same tactics. So it really has changed the face of warfare. So for me, the fact that you've got a couple of female operators, it doesn't matter who operates a drone, right? And
No.
if you do a little bit of research on the Ukrainian service men and women, the women generally aren't given frontline combat roles. So there are some snipers, there are some allocated units, but generally they're not. They're doing still in the military, still doing combat roles, but not frontline combat roles. Because one of the things was ICM have also released some paratroop figures, some combat servicemen. So why not the same for women? It's like, well, because that actually really isn't happening. So it's not really a reflection of reality.
Yeah.
For me, the selfie thing.
Soldiers using a mobile phone. I mean, where do they think all this footage from that conflict is coming from? It's coming from soldiers using mobile phones. It's just normal nowadays. And not using females in sort of frontline enemy facing roles is also in line with everybody else. There are a lot of females in the British Armed Forces, but you wouldn't expect to see any of them in the field actually holding a rifle, defending themselves. We all can. Don't get me wrong, we've all had the same training. We can all use a rifle and shoot something like, but that's a last resort type thing. They don't put women into those roles. They're still not allowed to do it. So.
And actually, in one of the things that people may not have noticed is these are all of these, and you get them in the figures. They're all armed.
Mm-hmm.
They all have, I think that's an AK-74.
Yeah, I mean, I did a couple of tours in Afghanistan with the C-130 fleet, and we were armed constantly. We all had rifles with us 100% of the time.
Yeah.
But we weren't going outside the wire, and that's the difference. The frontline role, you're going outside the wire, you're actively putting yourself in harm's way, and women don't tend to do those roles, even in Israeli forces and Ukrainian forces. But I think they're far more likely to do that in those forces than they are with us. The closest you'll get female-wise with the UK or European or US forces is pilots.
Yes.
Is aircrew.
That's correct here. Yeah, in the US. Yeah.
You get female fighter pilots that will be there doing that, but that's it. On the ground, like boots on the ground, tend not to be.
Yeah.
But no, I don't see it as sexist remotely at all. I think it's a clever marketing move.
Yeah, I mean,
and I'm pleased that they've got the body armor done up.
Yes.
I'm saying.
Well, funnily enough, I can't remember if this was on our Discord, John, but there was a photo of a Merkava in Israel. The crew was female, and they were all laid on the top sunbathing in bikinis. And it's like, if you did that at a modeling show, you would get crucified.
Right, exactly.
And yet it's so
It's literally what they were doing, and so I've been busy working on my Merkava 2D, man.
oh, wow.
This is a fantastic kit. This is the border models one.
Yeah, because the Merkava has the front engine, doesn't it? And then
It does.
it can carry us like half blood in the back, doesn't it?
It opens in the back. It's got the
Oh, it actually opens on my
yeah. That's a great kit. Yeah.
Wow. Are you going to do it close so you'll never see it?
Oh no, it's because it's got all full interior. I'm gonna keep as much open as I can.
Yeah. Good man.
Cool.
See, I have my my tank interior kind of itch scratched by watching John Alex do them. I don't feel the need to do it myself. I'll send you a mini art Stuart with all that interior, John.
I couldn't do it as well as jet scale models. I don't know if you've been following that, but jet scale models, James, his is the benchmark. The way he's doing that new ICM Stuart M3 is just couldn't possibly do it better. Yeah, jet scale models.
I think for me as well, the with these figures, they're all 35th scale, right? All of the ICM kits. It wouldn't be too hard if you really felt the need to do a little bit of kit bashing. Nowadays, and you can see from the figures, it's difficult to depict male and female as different in full combat gear, because the normal cues you get, sort of breasts, hips, curves and stuff, are completely like obliterated by combat gear. By the webbing, by your protective vests,
Alice pack.
Yeah, you got helmets and everything. So really, you're only looking at them bulk, and people come in different shapes and sizes anyway. So it's like it's hard, So one of the things they've done quite cleverly, I think, with this kit is they're all wearing t-shirts. So rather than like the full jackets that the male figure's wearing in the other sets, because that allows you to show the arms. So again, women have a layer of subcutaneous fat that men don't, which even if you've got the same musculature, it'll look smoother on a woman because you kind of have that layer over the top, smoothing out that definition. So that's an easy way to show that that's a female arm rather than a male arm, which would be kind of more defined and hard lined and maybe have some veins on it and stuff. You don't see all that ugly stuff on women. So, but even so, with a bit of kit bashing, you could put them in combat gear because they're in combat gear. The only thing you need to do is change the arms and the head, So, yeah, for me, it was a bit of a storm. It just seemed unnecessarily picking a bone to fight with, It's like, shouldn't they be praised that they're actually showing that women are in active combat and actually, they don't have a choice, right? So, yeah.
I think you have people that sit around thinking of ways in which other people might be offended, right?
Yeah.
Well,
they work so hard.
I'm not one of those people.
Yeah. Also, I mean, just from a personal point of view, right? If I was a woman, which obviously I'm clearly very far from being, and there was a whole, positive movement for 50% roles and everything, I wouldn't want to be put into the army. And if I was, I wouldn't want to be on the front line. It's like, no, thank you very much. I'll take my privilege of being able to stay away from that shit. And keep it. Thanks. No, thank you. If I'm going to be drafted, I don't want to be. I always thought if I was going to be in any armed forces, kind of because I'm from Lincolnshire as well, which is Bomber County. You know, we had, some of my family were in the RAF. I'd be in the Air Force because the amount of training that you have, there's a lot more specialized stuff. You know, especially pilots. You know, they spend hundreds of thousands of pounds training pilots.
Oh yeah.
To put them in a millions of pound aircraft piece of kit, with people also paid, you know, hundreds of thousands of pounds, £100,000 worth of training, with hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of kit to maintain all of that. They want to keep you alive because it's a substantial investment. The army, it's like you go through basic training. Here's a gun. You might get some, you know, combat gear if you're lucky. Good luck. We'll see you in 6 weeks. You know, it's like, you know, pilot ejects. It's like, well, we'll send a search and rescue out and get him back.
You got to get that guy.
Yeah.
Or gal.
It's like, nah, nobody wants to burn and drown at the same time. Thank you. So the Navy's right out. Well, I think it was, you know, again, the Falklands War, you know, when the Exocet hit HMS Sheffield, you know, I think that was the first time I realized as a child, metal can burn. You know, it's just like, that's not a great situation to be in, you know, in something which is basically your floating home, which is on fire, and you literally between the devil and the deep blue sea. It's like, no, definitely. So how about the Navy? That's a big nope for me, thanks. A little bit different now, I suppose, because we have layered defense. You know, I think, what did we have then? It was the Sea Dart, which was, I think we had like 4 Sea Darts at max on as defense, which weren't capable of taking out an Exocet, I don't think. Or I think they were, but I think because it was something weird, like because we used Exocet at the time, it wasn't programmed to see that as a threat. Something stupid, some software glitch. Whereas now, of course, you have Sea Scepter and whatever the short range one is. You know, you've got layers of defense which are capable of taking out hypersonic missiles, never mind about Exocets. You know, Exocets wouldn't get anywhere near a modern Navy. Oh, that's an interesting take. I don't know whether you're being, whether that's a joke, Powell, or you really do. The mobile church set. I was really excited about the mobile church set that ICM did. I'm not a Christian. My science background kind of screwed that one up for me. It's a real thing. You know, a lot of people, and you've got to think about the time. You know, back in the 30s and 40s, most people had faith of some sort. Not so much these days. You know, it was a slightly simpler time, and that gave people perhaps the faith, the courage they needed at the time.
Yep.
So, but I just thought it was neat to have like the little cup and the candles and the little Hammond organ thing. You know, but cool.
There aren't many atheists in the foxholes. There's some sort of expression about that, or some sort of, you hear it all the time. It's like, you know,
it's like everybody's a believer at 30,000 feet, right? When you go through heavy turbulence,
something like that. Yeah.
It's just like the Lord's Prayer is being recited by people who barely remember words. Yeah, it's just like
gives people some comfort. That's it.
I can see Alex flying out of his Spitfire, downing a Hun and twirling his grape. This isn't a Graham Hill moustache. Come on, his was much more pencil.
Well, if you had a Spitfire to drive, you could certainly work on it, right?
I could, yes. If somebody gave, open thing. If somebody donates a Spitfire to me, a proper one, not a model, no, you're not getting away with that. I'll make this a Graham Hill moustache. Get rid of the beard. So I might have told this story before, but I read a book by. I mean, he was pretty much a Nazi. he was pretty much full believer. A guy called Heinz Nock. His book was "I Flew for the Führer," and he actually ended up going into the German defense forces, the Luftwaffe, and organizing stuff after the war, as a lot of ex-service people did in various nations after the war. But he wrote about his experience. He mainly flew the 109. And at one point, they had a photo reconnaissance Spitfire that kept flying over this particular area, and they couldn't catch it. And so they got a bottle of brandy, really good, or cognac, and put it on their fireplace. And it was for whoever shot him down. And at one point, I don't think it was their squadron that shot him down. They heard he had been shot down. And so they all got in their Kubelwagen, I presume, drove out to where he was to get him before whoever it was, the Gestapo or whatever, came to take him off to the POW camp. Brought him back to their squadron mess. And they basically told him the story and said, we've been saving this bottle of cognac, and they shared it because they still had that that kind of mentality of that they were knights of the air, and
Correct.
That was first. Flying was first, and all of the war and everything kind of enabled them to do it. But they looked after him and gave him everything until the guys came to take him to the POW camp.
Well, they did
I'm not sure that was strict procedure.
They did that for Richthofen, didn't they? Didn't they give him a real nice?
Yeah, they buried him properly. Yeah.
Yeah, there was that.
Each other.
Yeah, I mean, those. If you've ever seen, I once went in a World War I dogfight simulator. Right? And I have a pretty cast iron stomach, even as a passenger, I am I don't get motion sickness really at all. My God, when I came out, it's like the bravery of those guys. I mean, certainly from the RF side, we didn't have parachutes because they were thought to be a disincentive to perform heroically. The Germans were a little bit more pragmatic and actually did have parachutes. But those things, string bag things, the maneuvers that they could do, incredible bravery. Okay, people watching part 2, the organization depicted as offensive. Well, I mean, that may be your view, Powell. I respect it, but there's a lot of people that would disagree, And modeling being what it is, we can all take what we want from it. I'm sure there are models that some of us don't like. We move on, right? If I'm at a model show and I see some models that I'm not particularly interested in, I don't spend very much time looking at them. Galland in his book got drunk with Douglas Bader. When Bader asked to try out Galland's plane, he almost said yes. Yeah, I'm not sure Bader would have just not
would have come back.
Yeah, just thanks, dude. It's appreciate it. I'm not bringing this back. Yeah, I think I've mentioned. I'm sure I've mentioned before. I read Johnny Johnson's the first of his autobiographies, and talking about. But it's amazing because he's just very nonchalantly writing. It's a very easy book to read. He's quite a good writer. He's just sort of recounting his experiences, and it's almost that nonchalance which belies the bravery inherent in them. And talking about Bader instructing his guys and going to the bar, and it's like Guy Gibson is there, you know, and you just all these like massive names. It was just like not even thinking about it, you know? Because of course it's all retrospective. You know, if Guy Gibson had been shot down, you know, at whatever point, he wouldn't have become what he was.
That's the fellow that flew like 200 different kinds of planes or whatever. The famous guy who you have to look him up. But
Guy Gibson was he was in Bomber Command.
He was the CO of 617 Squadron that did the Dambusters raid.
Oh, okay.
The one you're thinking of is Winkle Brown. He was a Fleet Air Arm pilot, test pilot.
I'm thinking about the guy. There was a British fellow, and he flew like every plane. And then after,
it's yeah, I've got his book to read actually. I think it's
he went around trying to fly all the planes that they had at the end of the war, right?
It's Eric Brown. He was known as Winkle. That's who you're
That's
thinking.
him. That's him. Thank you, Jen.
Yeah.
That's him.
I'm terrible with names. It's like faces, not a problem. I can remember if somebody walked in now that I haven't seen for 30, 40 years, I would recognize them straight away in a crowd. I wouldn't be able to remember the name for Toffee. Okay. Yeah, so I think one of the things that I like about some of the recent ICM releases, I am sounding like an ICM fanboy here now, but they'll do a kit, like the Beaufort is a good example, right? They did the Beaufort, they did the Beaufort with tropical filters, they did the Beaufort in foreign service, and they did the Beaufort with RAF pilots, you know, which is a great kind of way to sell it, right? Because you can get an individual kit of the aircraft if you're only interested in that in various different formats, and then you can get like it for a diorama, or you can, you know, do some interesting things with that. I think the stuff then that they're doing with, they're doing the same sort of thing with like the German ambulances. I think they've got 3 different types: Multier, the KF 251, and then some other truck, and they're doing that with medical personnel now, you know, and again showing that slightly more relatable human side, you know, the non-combat side. You've got the field kitchen they've done for the Germans, like the old Tamiya one, but a little bit more updated. So again, you know, you can do some interesting diorama stuff and again tell those more human stories. And I think to your point, you know, way back an hour and a half ago or so, Jen, some of the things that a lot of female modelers do, those little sort of diorama type things, you know, maybe that is a way as well, you know, showing that more human side, which kind of goes back to my original kind of biological thing about men are interested in stuff more, women tend to be interested in people more. Again, showing that people side and telling those stories. I think, you know, I think a lot of guys find it difficult to do dioramas, you know, other than not vignettes, not just like, here is a tank with some, you know, broken rubble and walls and stuff.
Yeah,
and
a guy. Yeah.
Maybe a guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
That doesn't really tell a story. I've got an old friend called Phil Stachinkas, very, very, very talented guy. And, you know, to the level that he sculpts all his own figures. You know? But if you look at his dioramas, they're always about something. They've always got something else going, and there's a human thing. He did one called the Water Carrier that was at Telford, which was, it had I think it was a Hummel or a Nashorn. That was the main fig kit, but then there was like a big barn, and there was like some guys, and there was an old woman with some water, like talking to them and obviously berating them for whatever they'd done. Again, it tells a story. He had another one where there was, I think it was a Panzer II or something going through, obviously early war with the red and white swastika flag over the top, you know, in parade with a bunch of German soldiers, and he had a little boy with like a rotten tomato behind his back, ready to throw it at them when they're gone. You know, just stuff like that, which gives a little bit of a more interesting slant. I think now having figures off the shelf, and Mini Art does this a lot as well. You know, with their stuff like their cafe scenes
and stuff. Yeah,
all of the cheese that you can buy.
yeah.
In plastic form. I do love cheese.
Me too.
You know, it makes it easier to do that. Right?
Cheese.
That's it.
Very good, very good.
But kind of circling back to the beginning of our conversation, you know, when I was at Telford last year, wandering around the competition area, there were more women modelers there than I'd seen, I think, in any show before. Interestingly, for me, where they were tended to be, so you I don't know if you went and saw the competition display. They kind of have aircraft all around the side because there's a lot of them in the various categories, and AFBs. And then the middle section tends to be other stuff, and there's a couple of rows of that. One is kind of armor and things, but it tends to be so all the Warhammer, the sci-fi figures, naval subjects and stuff. And no surprise that most of the women I saw tended to be centered around that central bit, around the sci-fi, around the figures. There's also like a flat figure painting thing now, which is a bit odd, but again, you see those at various model shows, including regional ones, like at Yeovil there was. And to me, it's just like, that's great, but I'd love to see more modelers like yourself, Jen, like Jess, Scale Model Snail, who does a lot of cars, you know, come into those, what we think of as, you know, the main kind of modeling categories, you know, the aircraft, the AFVs, the cars that make up the kind of bulk of the hobby. So I don't know if the sci-fi figures bit is kind of the thin end of the wedge, you know, how we get more women into modeling, you know, entice them in with the trail of breadcrumbs.
Ultimately, though, it's interest, isn't it? If
exactly, yeah.
If people are interested in things and they have a practical bent, then they'll model them. And the sci-fi side of things is, it may be a coincidence, but one of the other female models I know does sci-fi stuff because she likes watching it on TV. It's relatable.
Oh,
yeah.
You know, and it's relatable to more people. The thing you said earlier about anime and Gundam, that's a generation thing. It passed me by. I'm too old, but my younger siblings all watch that, and that isn't, you know, boys and girls watch that just as much as each other. So it doesn't surprise me. And again, my daughter likes to make Gundams, and they are fantastic kits as well. I would urge anybody
to
go out and buy a Bandai Gundam kit and just build it, because they're absolutely fantastic, regardless of whether you like crazy pretend robots or not. But it doesn't surprise me what you say about the fact that there seem to be more females in that side of things. Because of that, it's relatable to them. Not that many females find Spitfires and Vulcans interesting.
No.
Or tanks.
Or, Panzer IVs, yeah.
Yeah, no, I get that. But, I mean...
What is a Gundam? Yeah, exactly. The big stupid robots.
But, I mean, there are quite a lot of non-military, quite sexy aircraft.
Oh, sure, yeah.
That are, I mean, especially now with some of the projects that are going on. I follow a lot of like tech stuff, obviously. You know, flying cars or like small scale cars that are legal to, so small scale aircraft that are legal to fly for lower levels of, you know, all that kind of stuff. Because they've got a lot of automation, AI support and things. You know, again, I guess as these things become more prevalent, I guess, more relatable, as you said, because I think that's the key, right? It's exactly that. You hit the nail on the head. it's what you're interested in and what you can relate to. Like I said before, I can't relate to a truck.
No.
It doesn't speak to me. It doesn't interest me. But I am excited by an ME-262 or a Space 1999 Eagle or Hawk, or a Panzer IV even. I'm aware of the time, and I just have a couple of questions here. Question: as 14th of August is the 50th anniversary of the first flight of the Tornado, is anyone doing an anniversary kit? P.S. Airfix's 1975 Tornado 172nd tour was released 17 times by Airfix. Anybody planning on doing a Tornado?
No.
Not I.
50 years. Can't believe that.
It is. I mean, I remember the Tornado coming into service.
I do too, because they pushed out my beloved Lightnings.
Yeah. Well, my dad's favourite aircraft was the Lightning, so he was known to that. Although, he liked the Tornado, it didn't have that special feel to it.
My dad was the B-17. That's how old he was. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things, I think we did it on the Nostradamus episode, actually, of Beyond the Box, about what we thought was going to be coming. I think a Tornado was in there somewhere. I mean, for me, it would make sense as an Airfix pop-up surprise kit, because Airfix, haven't done a new Tornado for, since 1975.
It'd be nice, wouldn't it?
So if Airfix were to do that, I'd do an anniversary one. I've not really ever seen a really good kit that I would want to do of the Tornado.
Yeah.
Because it's a fairly chunky aircraft. So 1/72nd scale, actually, it's a decent size. I think I tried the Italeri one, which was mid, very much like this thing. That's the engine block that I had to remove. I think about 20 ejection pin marks off. That was fun. So yeah, if Airfix were to do that, because it was a mainstay of the RAF for quite a long time, but otherwise, probably not.
The 72nd was probably the best kit is the Rebel still, but the transparencies are ruined on it. They don't come out very well now, and there's not a lot you can do to fix them. So yeah, there isn't, in my opinion, there still isn't a definitive excellent rendition of a Tornado in any scale.
Yeah, so Airfix, if that's going to be your surprise release.
No, do the Jaguar first. Don't listen to him.
I would hope they do the Jaguar. I think actually my prediction was the Jaguar. I think the Tornado might have been an also in the. I have to go back. I can't even remember what I said now. which will be interesting come to the end of the year when we have to review it. Wow. Yeah, that is a lot of them. 164. So I was recommended, as you just said, Jim, go and do a Gundam. I was recommended by people on the channel I should do that. So at Telford, I went and got a couple from a clearance bin because I wasn't prepared to spend much money. I did one on stream, and then I was told that's not a Gundam, that's something else. And it's just like, it was Bandai. I said, I do apologize that my made-up Japanese space robot isn't the right kind of made-up Japanese space robot, but it was a good kit. I did enjoy it.
They're fabulous. They're molding. They mold the sprues in separate colours, like as in one sprue has got 4 different colours on it.
Oh wow!
I mean, and then the big scale ones, they have sort of different levels. The masterwork ones, they have like hands that are on the sprue. When you clip them off, they move. They're already articulated as molded. It's ridiculous. The technology and the excellence of the tooling is just so far ahead of everything that all of our plastic kits have in them. It's ridiculous, and that's why I say just go and try one out, because they're just really cool things to build. Doesn't matter that they're not Spitfires, really.
No.
Just great models.
And I think as well, doing something like that, and just as we're getting just up to 2 hours now, 10 o'clock, the witching hour. So just as kind of final point on that, something like a Gundam, if you've never considered doing something like that and it's not really your thing, it's a great thing for if you feel stuck in a rut. You don't know what to do, you need something to get your mojo back. Try something as a palate cleanser. You don't want to see another Spitfire because you've got 3 on the bench or whatever. Do a made-up Japanese space robot, because I was quite surprised. The fit on them is really good. I mean, mine was an old one as well. It wasn't like a brand spanking new one.
Well, they're clipped together. You hardly need glue.
No. Well, this was designed
to paint them either.
The most difficult thing for me was this was a weird like bio robot, which was why it wasn't a Gundam apparently. So it had this strange like with sort of soft vinyl kind of rubbery bit for the bioengineered muscle or whatever, and you had to cut obviously the holes because it was all molded in one, so you had to cut holes where you had to put pieces through. That was the hardest bit of the kit, and that wasn't hard. You could have done it with scissors, but in fact I probably made it more difficult by doing it with the scalpel. But if that's the level of difficulty, if you're struggling with normal kits, you just want something easy, a Bandai Gundam is a really good recommendation.
All right, let me go get. Hold on.
3 Mechatros. I have no idea what those are, John. You have to tell us what those are before we go. Oh, hi, Nunu. Didn't see you pop in. Welcome, my friend.
Okay, let me put his leg back on.
This is what you're guiding us out with, John.
So,
that's cool.
Yeah, I've done 3 of them now. So this is my Bournemouth.
I was going to say, is that in Bournemouth?
Oh yeah, man. So they're articulated. This one keeps falling off. Sorry. Hold on. Not me after having a beer. Yeah. And the lid comes off. So I did this, and then so my daughter's a Chelsea fan, and so I built one for her in the Chelsea colors. And then I did one in Arbroath, the red lifties. Yeah. But these are cool, man. They're called a Mechatro Go or something like that. Yeah.
Well,
all right.
On that note.
Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you all in the chat for coming along and listening to us talk and go down our various meandering paths this evening. Have a great rest of evening or day, wherever you are. Take care of yourselves, and hopefully we'll see you again in another stream. Cheers, everybody.
Bye-bye.